Welcome to Family Matters, Legal Edition, a special monthly segment of the Business of Family podcast. I'm Tammy Buss, family business advisor and founder of Blue Roots.
And I'm Yola Ventresca, managing partner at Learners LLP. Together, we're diving into the legal issues that impact family businesses, from succession and shareholder agreements to conflict resolution and governance.
Whether you're in the founder's seat, part of the next generation, or advising a family-run company, this series is here to help you navigate the legal side of legacy with clarity and confidence.
Join us every third Tuesday of the month for real talk, real stories, and practical legal insights.
Because in family business, the law isn't just about protecting assets, it's about protecting relationships.
Well, welcome back, everyone. We've all heard the phrase, don't wait until there's a fire to buy insurance, haven't we?
Mm-hmm.
The same is true for legal planning and family enterprises. And today we are going to talk about why waiting until there's a problem can cost your business. And as Tammy knows very well, your relationships very dearly.
Absolutely. I don't know why. Do you know why so many families wait to wait till the problem, till the horse is out of the barn before they seek legal advice? I have my own personal opinions, but what do you think?
I mean, from my experience, I think there's a difficulty in having those very candid conversations. I think that people think that the conversation itself about the family business, about what might not be going right, is going to irreparably harm the relationship and the primacy of the relationship, and that perception that having that conversation might make one. We're talking about siblings, for example. If I'm the sister and I need to have I'm wanting to have a conversation with my brother, the bringing up of a sensitive issue might irreparably hurt that relationship. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that people kick down the line. I think that the desire to want to ensure that, that and this goes along to what I said first, that the primacy of the relationship remains the focus of the family enterprise, rather than realizing that injecting some business sense into the family enterprise will preserve the family relationship.
Yeah. I think it's really comes down to it's legal. People really don't like legal.
Or lawyers.
or lawyers.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to say that.
Yeah. But that's okay. I've heard it.
But it's really, reactive. I think when you start a business or when you're in business, there's so many other factors that you need to focus on that we tend to be more reactive early on, right?
Yeah, and some of them are not bad. I mean, obviously, when you're getting a business off the ground, you're working very hard. Sometimes it's hard to come up, for a breath of air and say, okay, well, this was something that we got going. It's expanding and it's growing faster than we ever thought it was going to. And those structures were not in place because we were just putting everything we had into the business.
Well, and the timeline, right? When you look at a business, even at the startup even, you've got so many things on your plate. The last thing is like, well, we got to get an agreement in place.
That's right.
Particularly in family business. I think you're more apt to get an agreement in place, like a shareholder's agreement, something like that, if you're with a friend or, a business colleague,
right.
not necessarily a family. But when you're family, when you're starting out, you don't think about it. And then if you fast forward, because maybe you started the business and there is no other family other than maybe your spouse. But if your children come into the business, again, there's so many other things to focus on that the last thing you really focus on is the legal side until something happens. Because, to be proactive and pay all this money to have these agreements in place or have your lawyers look at it just seems like, there's more important things to spend your money on. When in fact, it could cost you more by not doing it.
Tenfold.
Than doing it.
Yes.
But we tend to look at it as a pure cost. I think my clients see it as a pure cost.
Rather than an investment.
And that's a hard thing to change, right? It's a hard thing to change people's minds unless you've been through something.
And, it's very interesting that you say that. Sometimes I've had clients who've come to me because an organization they know or a company they know or a friend has gone through something tumultuous in their own family business and has seen the stress that event caused them and has realized that having a discussion with a lawyer, putting agreements into place, whether they be employment agreements or shareholder agreements or some form of governance, that even from a psychological perspective, it's going to protect them more, and they see it more as an investment.
Mm-hmm. It's hard because as a family, you're asking your family to sign these agreements if something goes sideways. It's kind of like having a prenup.
Yeah.
Right. And, in a lot of cases, what I've seen happen is that a family business has been successful and you have a child in the business and they got married and maybe the business wasn't at its full capacity yet, or, it wasn't a big deal financially. But then next child goes to get married and you might not like the spouse.
That's right.
The potential spouse. And now all of a sudden you want to protect it, but you've got one who's already married and you like that spouse. This is where it becomes a problem, right? As opposed to, hey, we need to have an agreement in place for shares, or if you become a shareholder, or what happens on death, to look at it in advance, as opposed to waiting till somebody comes along and you want to, now you got to have that conversation about why we need to get you to sign this now. Well, what's happening?
Well, what's happening?
Like I've, been married for 10 years and you haven't asked me to sign this. What's going on?
Right.
So I think it really is proactive, and you're right that most business you get is because they've heard of something go sideways and they don't want that to happen to their family.
That's right.
Or their business.
That's right. And I think that people also are under the impression that it's going to be a huge layout of money, and it really isn't. And you can have a very frank conversation with your lawyer about what you want to put in place and how you want to put it in place, and a timeline for putting it in place, so that there's not this gigantic layout of cash all at once. And I certainly, we certainly work with people and say, okay, these are the most important frameworks or policies, right, or documents to have in place now, and this is what it's going to cost you. Mm-hmm. And then in 6 months' time, come back to us and we'll work on the next round, right?
Well, again, the topic today is, don't wait till there's a fire, but really it's like maintenance. It's like maintenance on your vehicle, maintenance on your house. Every year, you always set aside money every year for something that's going to come up, right? That needs to be fixed or addressed or looked at or replaced. And I think the same thing should be done in business, that you have a chunk of money that's set aside to update policies and procedures, to have reviews done of your legal agreements. Again, it's just maintenance to look at it. Or, there's a lot of legislation changes. There's a lot of things change. Family dynamics change.
That's right.
There's more kids, grandkids. Like, there's so many elements that we just tend to think, and I know this from a business perspective myself, there's stuff sitting in the corner of your desk that you'll get to eventually, and eventually is like 3 or 4 years later, it's still sitting there.
That's right.
Because it's not a top priority.
That's right.
It becomes a top priority when something goes sideways.
Yeah, and if I can give you an example, I have clients who I've worked for well over a decade, and we worked very slowly to put their legal instruments, as I call them, into place. And what they come back for me for is now maintenance. Mm-hmm. And that maintenance, that prompt for the maintenance isn't just one way. So I'm not just sitting there waiting for them to come to me. I'm also alerting them to big changes that could really impact their business. So, for example, in 2024, the legal world is talking about a very big employment law case that has come out, which says that any employment law contract, which says that an employee can be terminated at any time, is void. That termination provision is void. And I can tell you, Tammy, that 90% of employment contracts had that provision in them. So when news hit that this decision had landed, very unfavorable to employers, I sent around a bulletin to my clients and said, dust off those employment contracts and
get this line changed.
Get this, let us have a look at them, because if you have a 25-year employee and you have not updated that contract, you could be on the hook for 25 years worth of notice. And so I think that it's not only for the maintenance, but it's someone who's got their ear to the ground in terms of what's changed, because really, just as if I were an accountant, I don't know what I don't know. And so I think we learners also play the role of keeping our ear to the ground, telling you when very immediate action needs to be taken, because legislation is coming into place that may have a very big impact on your business.
Well, and one of the issues I think that's important is, again, looking at the three circles. So the family, the business, and the ownership. And I say this in every podcast. I always mention the three circles because there's legal that needs to be done in the family circle.
Yes.
There's legal in the ownership circle, and then there's legal in the business circle. And they're all different, but they're all connected, right? And so when you're looking at legal, we tend to look at one specific thing. We need a shareholder's agreement. We need an employee contract. But really, there's all these elements that you need to keep a close eye on, which is your wills,
That's right.
your powers of attorney.
That's right.
And particularly for your family business, what happens in the family is going to trickle into the ownership and trickle into the business, and vice versa. If you do something in the business, it's going to trickle into the ownership or the family. So it's important that your legal team or your firm has the ability to say, okay, well, this is going to impact something else.
And that's very astute. And one of the things that's fantastic about learners is that we are a full service firm. So, we have people who deal with employment law and HR issues, wills and estates, family law. So it sometimes is the case that we have meetings where, there's going to be there's going to be a change made that's going to impact all of those areas.
Absolutely.
Right. And so we have all of the lawyers are in the room together at once to figure out how am I going to adapt what's already in place, with respect to the will, with respect to the prenup, with respect to the corporate documentation. So I think that one of the big benefits that we bring to the table is that all of your lawyers are housed under one roof, and so you don't have to go and then retain 3 different law firms,
and that actually saves money.
It does,
right? Because you're looking at from one aspect to the other. And part of my role as a family business advisor is to get alignment, is to understand the areas, to get family aware of these areas, to know they need to talk to their lawyer about this, they need to talk to their accountant about this, whether I'm involved or not. I'm looking at the whole family, and the family includes the business and the ownership, and making sure that what they want to happen is in place, right? Because it's too late once the horse is out of the barn.
No, it absolutely is. And,
or to explain why you've chosen that decision.
That's true. And we talk a lot about intention and, what's the saying about the best of intentions?
Yeah.
But you need only read some recent case law around the.
Can you tell us that, because we're not likely to read that?
Yeah, no, I mean there is a case where recently there was 4 siblings. They were involved in a business together. They did not have any real governance structure, employment law contract, nothing in place. So
which is typical,
and if you're listening to this, it's not too late.
You're no different than every other family business.
That's right. And so 3 of the siblings got together and decided they were going to fire the 4th. Well, that resulted in litigation and a very significant award being paid out to that family member who had that 4th sibling who had worked in the family for, decades. There was no notice given, no attempt to settle or to come to terms. But this is what happens and you get into an argument and they decide that they want the fourth out, and they think that because their family and there's 75%, and maybe they thought that the fourth, the sibling in question was not going to sue.
Yeah, and again, that comes back to, was that a business decision? So are you firing that person from the position? Were you getting rid of them from an ownership perspective? How does that work? So this is where it all impacts every other aspect of the family and the ownership.
Right.
And if you have roles and responsibilities in the business and you have governance in the ownership side, then we'd have that, or they would have that discussion saying, it's not working. Here's the accountability, that this is not working well for any of us for these reasons, whether it's the business side or the ownership side. So they're clearly not having any conversations.
That's right.
No tough conversation, because no way would that be a surprise if three siblings have voted. So how did they vote? Like, what was the voting? Was it in the business side? Was it in the ownership
That's
side?
right.
Like, how did that come across?
No, it was really over a coffee table.
Yeah.
They just decided. And I don't think there was any thought given in what capacity are we acting,
and that's where you look at it, say, because, okay, we don't think you're the best CEO for this company for these reasons, but we still love you as a sibling, and you're still an owner. But how do we part? And, first of all, it shouldn't have got to that point, because there should have been some accountability along the way. And I'm not sure if there was or wasn't. But if there was, and they had discussions, it wouldn't have resulted in three, displacing the fourth.
Yeah.
But this is where, again, it would have been cheaper to have some of those agreements in place. And we don't think of it because, we're just a little company. It doesn't matter if you're a little company. It still costs you money.
That's right.
$100,000 to you is a lot of money, or $10,000, and to someone else $100 million. It's just the matter of the zeros. It's all relative.
That's right. And the other thing that I think is scary for me from when I think about my clients is, and you talk about you don't know what you don't know, is how quickly the law is evolving, especially with respect to some of these issues around family businesses. So, for example, another surprise that our listeners might not be aware of is that under the Human Rights Code, if you work in a family business and you are harassed because something has gone wrong in the family. So let me paint a picture for you. Your mom and your aunt have a business together, and you're working in the family business, and there is a personal fallout between your mom and your aunt is your supervisor. And all of a sudden her demands start getting more, and she's being unreasonable with you. You might actually the courts have said that by virtue of that familial relationship, you have a claim under the Human Rights Code, not only for workplace harassment as any other employee would, but you have a claim because of familial status.
Wow.
So it's a protected ground of discrimination. So it becomes a liability in a way that you're not liable to another employee. So if you can demonstrate that working relationship has gone sour because you are the niece,
a family,
you are liable under the Human Rights Code, and that can create all kinds of issues.
And the distraction, you don't really want the distraction of this in your business.
It is a distraction, absolutely. But the Human Rights Tribunal can do things like post on the door of your business that you have been found to have violated the Human Rights Code. I mean, there are very public remedies that the tribunal can order, which is not the case when you're I'm not saying but when you're being sued for wrongful dismissal. And that there you talk about reputational harm. I mean, those are very public proceedings.
Absolutely.
And the risk to the business, just increases tenfold.
So if you're in a family business and, you want to avoid, having these discussions, or, you're really kind of nervous about, going to a lawyer, getting all these agreements, what are some of the red flags that people could start to look at to say, you know what, we don't have these discussions, but something's just not right? Like what are some of the red flags that you might, as a family member, think, I think it's time to have some open and honest discussions with my family.
So what often leads people to me in those circumstances where there's been a red flag is that there's been a micro event. So, for example, choosing a vendor is one that I thought of recently. One person decides they are going to go with vendor X because vendor X is their friend. Mm-hmm. And the other, let's stay in the sibling context, the other siblings don't agree with it, but can't get sibling Y to change their mm-hmm. mind. And so what happens is they start thinking, well, what if it's a bigger mm-hmm. decision? The inability to listen to one another or mm-hmm. to take into account the other person's view, even on that very small scale mm-hmm. issue, because it wasn't a huge amount of money that was being laid out, but that feeling that I'm not being heard mm-hmm. and that my opinions are going to be disregarded. Mm-hmm. What if this was a more serious issue? Right. And
that, again, comes back to what are the rules and what are the responsibilities
That's right.
of that person's role? And do they have the right to choose that vendor? Or is that something that they all agree on together?
Right.
So these are things that when we talk about, when I'm talking about it with families, it's like, okay, well, this is an issue. How do you want to resolve that? Is it 2 against 1? Is it all have to agree? Like, is majority? How do you want to solve these issues? So if the rule was this person had the ability to choose that vendor based on the role that they had and the responsibility, then it wouldn't have got to that point.
No.
But if it's at this point that says, okay, past X amount of dollars, we all have to agree, or 2/3 agree, again, what you want to do is be proactive to stop these fights, because that could lead to, again, like you say, it's just one little, you're just kind of chipping away, just kind of pick.
That's right.
Until the whole sweater unravels.
Right? That's right. And, you know, the other issue is the other red flag. It's unfortunate that sometimes arises is that somebody will run into some very significant personal issues, and whether that be alcoholism or drugs or gambling, and there is no structure in place which allows the family to deal with it. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And sometimes people come to me and say, I'm a little bit worried, you know, my sibling is showing up late for work or has not been putting enough time in, and their spouse told me that they're concerned about them. And, you know, sometimes it's the personal red flags mm-hmm. that tweak people to coming in and trying to get some of those foundational documents into place.
Yeah, and that's hard.
It's very hard.
But you're late? What are you, micromanaging me?
That's right.
I can't come in 5 minutes late?
And you so, put it perfectly. I mean, that's exactly the type of conversation that you're having.
And that's one of the other things that sometimes I talk about is, are you allowed to have a sibling as your boss?
Yes.
Right? Do you want a degree of separation?
Yeah, that's
because
right.
Sometimes,
mm-hmm.
you know, that's not really what you want, because that in itself causes problems. Because it could be an age thing. Someone's older, younger, more experienced, less experienced, you know, male, female, like absolutely. Yeah. So again, this is when you really want to say, okay, if there was a problem, like let's put out the fire before it starts. Is there something here? Maybe all you do is scan the papers for, you know, family issues and say we need to protect them.
That's right.
Protect our own family.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think let's just kind of end by giving, 3 or 4 tips that you can start to foolproof your business or prevent that fire from destroying the whole thing.
Well, I think that you and I have talked about this extensively, but establishing clear buy-sell provisions for ownership changes, I mean, that's a really important one. A lot of times people will end up at my door because someone wants to sell. A very good offer has been made and they don't know what to do with it. I mean, I think that's a foundational issue and that needs to be dealt with from the start. Succession and estate plans.
Yes.
And aligning those succession and estate plans with business strategy.
That is key.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where, we would work with someone like Tammy if we're having problems, because I can usually only represent one side of an argument, and Tammy has the ability to facilitate discussion. So it's helpful to have her there as a resource, because those conversations, especially around succession planning in the event that something happens, are very, very difficult to have.
Well, and sometimes parents don't want to have that discussion because they know that the family members might not agree with it. Yeah. So they defer it, and then what happens is the family blows apart after the death of somebody because they didn't have an opportunity to explain their decisions.
Yep.
They just, it was a bit of a shock. So I do think when you're in family business, you really have to align the family, the business, and the ownership.
And then assuming that you have those foundational documents in place, which I would say are the shareholder agreement, the succession plan, employment agreements if there are any workplace harassment policy. Once you've got those foundational documents in place, just the way you would schedule regular maintenance, as you called it, schedule a regular maintenance with your lawyer to ensure that one of these cataclysmic events hasn't occurred and the entire legal world has shifted and you are sitting on some significant exposure because now all of your employment agreements are out of date.
Yes, that is key. Yeah. That is key, is really to know what you don't know.
Yeah. And so and then again, as we said, and I think you'll see the importance of this. We are beating a dead horse, but there's a good reason to do it. The documenting of roles and responsibilities.
Absolutely, it's one of the main focuses. That prevents a lot of disputes right there by having clear, defined roles and responsibilities for not just everybody in the business, but in particular your family.
Yes.
Particularly your family. It's okay when you're the founder, you don't really have that, but when you bring your next gen in or the next gen after that, that is when it's really key.
Absolutely.
So bottom line is, start small. Again, take a baby step. Just start looking. It's better to be proactive than reactive. It's a lot less expensive. Yep. And, good luck putting out that fire.
And as I say, I think about a lot of things that prevents people from coming in the door is that this is another expense. But I think I can speak for myself in that I have very candid conversations with my clients. Like, what is your budget? What do you want to do? And let me tell you what your priorities should be within that budget.
Yeah.
And then, let's work together again 3 months from now. There's not going to be any surprises. And, whether it's learners or somewhere else, I would encourage you to have those very direct conversations if that is your concern. Doing anything is better than doing nothing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, again, another episode
in the books.
That's it.
That's it.
So this was great. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Tammy. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Family Matters Legal Edition. We hope today's conversation gave you something to think about or talk about in your own family business.
If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who'd benefit from hearing it.
Have a legal question or topic you'd like us to cover in a future episode? Reach out. We'd love to hear from you.
Until next time, remember, in family business, what's legal is personal. Take care. The information shared in this podcast is for general educational purposes only and is not intended as legal advice. Listening to this podcast does not create a lawyer-client relationship. For advice specific to your situation, please consult a qualified legal professional.